And welcome everyone to another Smart Money Circle show. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is George Ng, who's the CEO of Processa Pharmaceuticals, ticker symbol PCSA. George, thank you so much for taking the time to join today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invite and the opportunity.
George, I would like to begin. Can you tell us a little about you and your background, please? How you got to where you are today?
Sure. I've actually been interviewed in this area because I've had a unique, I guess, path to where I am today. So I started out with a biochemistry background and an econ background, did a few years of reproductive genetics research, and then ended up disappointing my parents by not going to medical school, and ended up in law, and ended up starting out as a patent attorney. Given my science background, and then morphed into more of a general counsel corporate role. And at one point in time, I've been a chief legal officer, chief compliance officer, as well. And then moved over to the business side of things. And at one point in time, I've been a president, CEO, board member, chief operating officer, chief administrative officer, chief business officer of privately held as well as publicly traded, companies as well. So, and then now I'm currently the CEO of Processa Pharmaceuticals.
Oh, very nice. And I know you have a background in pharmaceuticals as well on the corporate side. Can you explain some of that, please, to the audience?
Sure, sure. So I've been in the pharmaceutical life sciences industry for over 2 decades, and in various roles, everything from the business side of things to legal side of things as well, and have been involved in all stages of drug development, from preclinical to clinical to commercial. And I've done everything from help lead preclinical teams move and help products move through clinical development, all the way through launching, leading the commercial product launches of various drug products. And so I've done all that. I've sold companies. I've helped take companies public as well.
Oh,
So
very nice. I love that. Let's talk about Processa if you don't mind. Can you tell us a little about your business and some competitive advantages, please?
sure. So Processa Pharmaceuticals is a pharmaceutical company that's developing next generation chemotherapy drug products. What I liked and why I joined Processa was because this is a unique situation. And having been in oncology for a couple of decades now, I've seen everything from early stage chemotherapy all the way to monoclonal antibodies to checkpoint inhibitors to now cellular therapies, cell therapies, as well as oncolytic viruses and whatnot. And this is a unique situation in which on one hand, it's a de-risk proposition because it's involving chemotherapy drug treatments, right? Which is chemotherapy is known. It's commonly used in first line, second line, widely used, but it has its issues, right? My own situation, for example, my sister, she, fortunately at a relatively young age, she came down in her late 20s. She came down with breast cancer, and then she received chemotherapy treatment and surgery, standard of care, and she recovered. But then a couple of years later after that, she ended up with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a blood-borne cancer because of the chemotherapy. And so when you give chemotherapy, it's like sending in a nuclear bomb, or to attack cancer cells. There's a lot of collateral damage. You have issues such as some patients just don't respond to it. So, for example, for one of the drug products we're developing, which is a next generation chemotherapy, capecitabine, for regular capecitabine, only 20 to 40% of all patients even respond. And then, unfortunately, because it has really nasty side effects and high toxicity levels, only about 35 to 70% of all patients on capecitabine, depending upon the indication, they have to go off the drug, or they have to have their dose limited, so it's not optimal, right? Because they can't deal with the with the side effects and the toxicity levels.
Right.
And then you also have chemotherapy drugs where patients acquire resistance to it. So similar to antibodies, right? The cancer cells. So for example, for another one of our drug products, next generation chemotherapy, gemcitabine, for regular gemcitabine, about 55 to 70% of all patients, they either have resistance already to it, or they acquire resistance through use. And then the cancer cells just don't respond, right? It loses the cancer killing effect right on it. So we're developing drugs to overcome these issues, right? And so that's why they're next generation chemotherapy drug products. And so on one hand, while we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we don't have to show that it actually works, right? Because I mean, because everybody knows that chemotherapy works, in general, or how they work.
Yes.
But at the same time, these are not Me Too products. These are not generic products. They're actually new chemical entities, and will be afforded the commercial advantages of that, which includes having its own J code, reimbursement, premium pricing. So it won't be priced as a generic, drug product. So that's why it's sort of, you have that, good balance of the two. And that's why I'm really excited about our drug products and our approach and technology.
I love that. And for the most part, it's still clinical stuff. So we're waiting for approval and for more stuff coming out. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what's great is that we already have two products that are in clinical stage.
Mhm.
Our NGC, or next generation chemotherapy, I'll shorten it to NGC CAP. So capecitabine already finished phase 1B study. We're moving on to a phase 2 in breast cancer. So for example, if we had this drug product around, it could have probably helped my sister, right?
Yeah.
So just to loop it back.
100%.
And then for NGC gemcitabine, that finished a phase 2A study. And we're now moving on to either phase 2B or the last phase, which would be a phase 3. So we're in the process of meeting with the FDA right now to come up with a next study design and the next steps, right? And so so both of those products are pretty late stage, already, a fairly late stage. In
Excellent.
terms of, oh, sorry.
No,
And our product is NGC irinotecan. That is in preclinical. So we have one preclinical drug product. Sorry.
excellent. No, not at all. So a few questions here. Like for investors, a path to profitability. Can you discuss, I know you do cancer and other chronic diseases, the total addressable market or the TAM for
Yeah.
what you're going after, please? And then how that could lead back to profitability and then future earnings and revenue growth, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. So I guess there's two parts. One is the company is going through a pivot or a transition to focus just on oncology. So in addition to our 3 oncology drug products, we do have 2 clinical stage drug products in different areas. One in GI for gastroparesis, which is a big issue these days because of the diabetes drug products right now, right? And the number one side effect is gastroparesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, food basically stops or doesn't move, or and then it's a really, or slows down so much that it causes a lot of discomfort, right? And then and we have also a dermatological drug product. So for those 2, we're not focusing on developing those, but we're in the process of out licensing and partnering those out. So hopefully that will bring in non-dilutive capital and revenue, but non-dilutive capital, and act as a catalyst for the company in the upcoming year. So we're in the process of discussing and negotiating with various companies right now for those 2 assets. And then turning to the oncology assets, as we all know, oncology afflicts pretty much everybody. Everybody either has a loved one, they themselves or a loved one or a friend that has cancer, right, or has had cancer, right? So for each of our drug products, it's no surprise that at least in the U.S., there will be at least 200,000. There's estimated 200,000 new cancer patients for each of those drugs per year, and that's just the U.S. alone. And so it's a $1 billion market, right? And the idea is that right now chemotherapy is widely used, again, in first line, second line, and just throughout oncology. And by coming up with a truly better chemotherapy drug product, one that works better, higher efficacy, as well as higher exposure, but also reduces toxicity levels and reduces adverse events, then we're hoping that we can corner the market. So it could be a pretty lucrative and pretty big market.
Perfect. I love that. Now, let's talk about some risk. How do you handle risk, and what are some mistakes you see people make with respect to risk management, please?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first off, that's the beauty of these technologies, is that they're de-risked, as I explained earlier, right?
Right.
Somewhat in that. So I just came from a world where, for example, dealing with cell therapy, questions are asked even, how do you know that stem cell actually reaches the target tumor, right? Through if you inject it systemically, does it travel through the bloodstream? So even simple questions like that, you have to prove. While in this case, you have a situation where you don't have that, right? And you have so the technology itself is, I mean, everybody knows how chemotherapy works. So there's there's already a de-risk proposition to begin with. But in addition to that, I think the one area where it really helps is having a really experienced management team. Throughout my career, I've learned the adage that and also as an investor, myself as well, I've invested in pharmaceutical companies, right? So that you really, you really invest it's better to have a experienced and great management team that can execute
Right.
rather than a great product, right? Because if you have a great product and technology, but you don't have the management team that can execute it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if you have a great management team that can execute and you have a mediocre product, that at least you'll know that that team will execute it all the way through, right? And give it the best shot of success. And so in this case, we have a very experienced management team and development team in Dr. David Young and Dr. Sean Bagora. This is the same team that really made Quest Core, right? So for example, in that situation, that company, when Dr. David Young was a board member, and they had one product, Acthar, that sort of languished for years. And so he came on board to, and join the company as a chief scientific officer to really develop that product. And within a year, with no additional studies required, he was able to get the FDA to approve Acthar for the first initial indication, and then 18 additional indications. And then that propelled the company. That company went from about 50 cents a share at that time to over $100, and then was eventually, acquired in a $1 billion deal.
Wow.
So
fantastic.
He's had over 30, regulatory approvals, to date. So when you have a team like that has and with them, they've developed over decades a proprietary regulatory science approach to drug development and clinical development.
Right.
And that's one reason why they've had over 30, regulatory approvals, right? And he's actually trained FDA reviewers, and he's drafted FDA guidance. And to take a real specific, situation right now, the FDA has a Project Optimus initiative and mandate, and they just issued guidance last year that now requires oncology pharmaceutical companies to actually come up with an optimal dose for their drug product rather than just a maximum tolerated dose, which is what we used to do, right? And so some companies are scrambling right now, from what I've heard, and they have to go back and redo studies and do additional studies, but we don't have to do that because we were already doing that with the company's proprietary regulatory science approach to development. So that's just one example, right? So I truly believe that having an experienced management team, it helps manage risk.
I love that. Okay, next question. From a timeless lesson standpoint, what are some timeless lessons you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience, please?
In what area?
Life, business, anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, no, I think I think the best advice I ever received was from the CEO of 1-800-Flowers, and I believe he was a former founder of Intuit, and I met him at a Columbia alumni event, and he mentioned that the highs are really not that high and the lows are really not that low. And he said that when you're making decisions as part of a management team, you have to keep that in mind. And so it's better to keep an even keel. And so you're not making decisions based upon emotion, whether it's high or low. And I thought that was really good advice, especially for managing a company, especially for a company that is in our situation where I truly feel it's undervalued. It's micro cap and with all this potential. And really it takes a steady, even keel of good decisions and strategy to steadily move the company forward and to add shareholder value, right?
100%. So that's a great, just keep your emotions level. Don't go too high, don't go too low, and then you make emotional decisions and you go all
Yeah,
bonkers.
that's right.
I love that. By the way, I have a book. It was #1 on Amazon for 3 months about investing, psychological analysis. That's the premise of the book. It's remove the emotions, make rational, not emotional decisions with your money, because money is very emotional for people. I love that.
Successful.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Okay, how about some timeless mistakes and how to avoid them that you've made or you've seen other people make?
Yeah, and again, I guess the flip side is I've seen people do things based upon emotion, right? Where it's not doesn't make good business sense, but they're just doing it because they feel like they've been wronged, right? And having especially been in I've of course having been a chief legal officer and an attorney, I've been through a ton of disputes, and I think a lot of times things can be resolved without having to go to litigation. And I've seen a company, uh, so for example, one situation, I won't name the company, but there was a company that I was in senior management, and I was the chief legal officer at one point in time, and I convinced the CEO not to, not to file suit because of the possible unintended consequences of it. The other party could countersue.
Right?
And after I left, many years later, he decided to sue.
Oh, wow.
And that based upon the countersuit, they ended up owing more than what they were getting,
Oh, wow.
and a lot more, like to the tune of 50, 60 million more.
Whoa.
And that ended up bankrupting the company. The company filed for bankruptcy. So, that's just things. So it's sort of the flip side of that is that don't do things just on emotion either.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I love that. So, what about leadership? Can you speak about that, please, and what makes a great leader?
Yeah, great. So I'll go back to the 1-800-Flowers.com CEO again, because he also told me that, hey, one thing that you need to remember is that, he said, if you ever become a CEO or you're in senior management, is that you didn't do this alone. It
Right.
takes a whole team.
Mhm.
And therefore, you should not just succeed by yourself either. You need to bring everybody with you. And it goes for the entire company, that every um, uh, individual has place in the company, and it's important, right? So and I think company culture is very, very important, as
Mhm.
well. And I think there's something to be said about that. I have been with some companies where it was all about business, which is great, right? But they forgot about the people,
Right.
right? And you forget that the people are what drive the business. Again, you'd rather have an excellent management team, an excellent team in general, rather than a mediocre one,
Right.
right? And you have to also, and that means bringing in talent. That means bringing in people that share your vision and your goals. And that's also another reason why I love the book, Good to Great,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because and the very first number one I guess first step and number one rule is to bring on a management team that shares your vision and your values,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so it's all about the people for me, right?
Mhm. I love that. And now let's talk about some adversity or obstacles you've had to overcome. How do you handle adversity? I'm going to guess and go on a limb here. You do it in a rational, not emotional way, but any other thing you want to share, by all means, please share it.
Yeah, no. So, when I joined Processa, I knew that it was going to be a bit of a transition, right? So again, it was a company going through transition. The stock price and along with a lot of other companies over the past couple of years had floated down, right? And they were looking for new leadership
Yes.
to sort of move it right in the right direction. And so really it was a challenge. The first few months were just dealing with corporate strategy. I
Mhm.
think in the first couple of months I had at least 3 or 4 board meetings, and a lot of it was just strategy, making sure we had the right messaging, making sure that we had, and I developed a 30, 60, 90-day goal, right? And it was very difficult because, our stock price was low. We were under $1. So we weren't meeting the NASDAQ minimum stock price rule.
Right.
And, could have been, delisted.
Right.
And so we went through the process of going through that to first, you know, build the corporate strategy, have, simpler messaging. And then, eventually we had to do a reverse split, right? To, to regain compliance.
Yeah.
And then we we executed on our clinical strategy. So we had, what I think was great data that came out, on both safety and efficacy. And then we were able to do a raise on that because we needed a fund. So another obstacle is, even if you have good news, but you don't have the money to
Right.
move the product forward, your stock's not going to move, right? So now we have the funds that will take us all, into 2025, help us weather through 2024, and at the same time also, we have the funds to initiate our phase 2 study for our lead asset.
Nice.
So achieved all our goals within the last 6 months, but it took a lot of work to get through all that, right? It was a lot of planning, a lot of thoughtfulness, and a lot of execution. So.
Love it. Final question, best piece of advice you'd like to share with the audience or give your 30-year-old self?
Wow, that's a great question. Best piece of advice. I'd say that that it's, so this is just in general, right? This is not not business.
Correct. Anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, so I would say, and I think part of it is probably the stage of my life and my career, where, Aristotle once said that you can say that you were happy at various times in your life, but you can't say that you led a good life until you've lived a long time and you can look back and reflect, or if death is at your door, right? And then, so more recently, there's quite a few folks around me that, for some odd reason, have had physical ailments or deaths in the family or themselves, including one of my groomsmen from my wedding. And one thing I regret and wish I could tell my 30-year-old self is to stop and really, connect with your friends and your family, focus on them, as well, and try to have a better work-life balance. I know it's tough, right? Because, I'm probably speaking to the choir right now.
Go.
Yeah, it's just our world, and really taking time to really, enjoy your family and your friends. And in the case of my friend, my one of my groomsmen at my wedding and former law school classmate, I had lost touch for a while, and then fortunately, he ended up passing away unexpectedly, for no reason, right in the middle of the night in his sleep. And I didn't really get a chance to really, catch up with him and see him over the last few years, right? Because I've been so busy. So
Right.
I think that's one of the things that I would advise is to really, prioritize your family and friends too.
Absolutely love it, George. I think that is one of the best pieces of advice we've ever gotten. It's just, it's almost like elevate yourself like an eagle looking down or 30,000 view foot. Get out of the rat race and just going through the motions and wake up and then tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Yeah, just smell the roses. Slow down, smell the roses. I love it.
That's right. So
George, it was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. The ticker symbol is PCSA. People can learn more by going to processapharmaceuticals.com. And then there's the investors page there, and they can learn more there. But hopefully we'll have you on again soon. This was absolutely fantastic.
thank you, Adam. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.